Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good morning, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and I am the host of the Muddy Waters Podcast, which exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state. Unfortunately, the Democrat Party has taken control of the mainstream media, which is, again, just basically their propaganda arm. They don't want to tell the truth about what's really happening. So this is why we exist, and we interview people usually from around Maine. But today we have the blessing to have with us Delanie Bomar, who works for the RNC. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chuck. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I feel blessed. I honored to have my lowly podcast have such a high person within the RNC spend time here with me. So thanks for coming on. Yeah,
I mean, Maine is going to be a huge part of the midterm. So I would say there's in no way are you a lowly podcast.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So before we kind of jump into like a couple of the fun topics, obviously there's news that kind of broke yesterday about Janet Mills, but like, who are you? What's your role? And I guess we'll start there.
Yeah. So like you said, my name is Delanie Bomar. I am here at the Republican National Committee, and I oversee our regional communications team. We have an amazing team of Republican communicators who are the attack dogs on Democrats every single day. And there's just so much going on around the country that we had to divide it up geographically. So we have our Northeast communications director who, like I was saying before we got started, said nothing but great things when she got to meet you last week. And then we have communications directors all over the country. So we deal directly with the local press, hit the local Democrats, and are able to just get that more local perspective as opposed to keeping everything national all the time.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the reasons that I started this podcast and obviously the reason that also the Maine Wire exists is because most of what's happening in the mainstream media, in addition to it being a propaganda arm for the Democrat Party, they're also trying to direct everything to what's happening at Washington, D.C. rather than what's happening here in Maine. And so that's why we try to highlight and focus on the things that are happening here that people aren't talking about enough. So yeah, and I think that's really important. I'm glad that you guys are doing that. It must be hard to keep up with, as you said, you had to break it into groups. So there's just so much content out there in the world of social media these days. And the Democrats are different than in the past, where they kind of were quietly in closed doors saying crazy things. Now they've gotten bold and they're saying them publicly, which is how we have somebody with a Nazi tattoo and has said some just awful things about women, rape victims, Black people, etc., and is somehow the Democrat nominee for the U.S. Senate to run against Susan Collins. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, where to begin? I mean, everything you rattled off right there is crazy enough, and I feel like the past 24 hours since this happened has just been a whirlwind, right? Yep. I mean, we all heard the rumors that Janet Mills was maybe going to drop out. That was no secret that there was that rumor floating around, but I think that people saw her as the person who the national Democrats were backing. We've all seen the reports. Chuck Schumer was behind her. And so I think there was this idea that they would at least come in and, save her. They don't want the Nazi guy being their nominee. There's no way they would just leave her hanging. Clearly, he would be too crazy, you would think. But clearly that was not the case. And we've all seen her, her statements that she's put out. There seems to be a lot of finger pointing as to whose fault it really is. But regardless, here we are with the Democrat nominee being the guy with the Nazi tattoo who, I'm sure we can get into all the crazy things he said, like you just rattled off. But it's just insane to me that this is where we're at. And essentially we're going into general election season at this point. There really is no more primary on the Democrat side.
Yep.
There will still be the election to make it official, but at this point, we're looking at a head-to-head between Graham Platner, the Nazi, and Senator Susan Collins, who just has the track record and is the adult in the room. And I think that contrast is so clear. And I am really excited to see this head-to-head because I think the contrast is so stark that, yes, it'll be entertaining to talk about, all of Graham Platner's crazy things, but also Susan Collins has a track record to run on. So I think that it's safe to say Republicans feel very confident in what's to come after the past 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the hope. I mean, the betting places still have the Democrats like most likely to win the U.S. Senate race here in Maine. But I think you're right. I think Susan Collins has a track record of successfully helping the people of Maine and being like a stateswoman, and just beloved largely by the people of Maine, that I think it is a little bit hard to believe, but it's also like what the Democrats in general have done recently is a bit hard to believe. And part of me is a bit conspiratorial and says like, because of the fact that the New York Times went and did this special on Graham Platner, the oyster farmer, they didn't highlight that he only sold oysters to his mom in their special, but they did that before he was running for office, right? And it's like, well, that I don't think they're counting that as a campaign contribution, but I think they should. It seems like I almost wonder if, again, I'm a little bit conspiratorial. If there was always a plan that she was supposed to lose to him to make him seem stronger, similar to what they did in New York with Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who resigned in disgrace running against Mamdani. Were they really trying to win, or were they just trying to strengthen the candidate that they really wanted that actually had more money and more stuff behind him? That's where, again, I get a little conspiratorial, but
yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see the National Democrats line up behind him the past 24 hours too, right? I mean, immediately Chuck Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, who oversees the Democrat Senate campaign arm, immediately out with the statement. It was kind of written like they didn't want to be endorsing him, but they had to. They don't explicitly, say a lot of positive things about him, but regardless, they're lining up right behind him. You see the DNC immediately endorsing him. You even see Tim Walz in Maine today campaigning with Graham Platner. So the fact that Democrats on the national level from outside of Maine are within 24 hours lining up behind the Nazi is so telling, in my opinion. I think, a couple years ago, if you would have explained this situation that in the top Senate race in the country, the Democrats candidate is a Nazi who makes jokes and blames women when they've been raped and talks bad about rural white Americans, there's no way. Like, people would have laughed at you. But here we are. And 6 months to the election, and Democrats are staring down the barrel of having to back up a Nazi and someone who's been very unapologetic as all of this stuff has come out about him too, right? Like, we all have seen the oppo the past few months, and Graham Platner has tried to explain some of the things, tried to make excuses for some of his old posts, but not everything. A lot of the things he's just ignored and pretended like they're not coming out. So the fact that Democrats know this stuff about him, know that he has not apologized or try to walk anything back, and they still back him and are on the campaign trail as early as today is so telling to me.
Yeah, the fact that none of this with Democrat voters anyway seems to stick to him, right? Like, I mean, he's even made comments. Again, you'd think one of the sacred cows of the Democrat Party is race, right? He's even made comments about Black people, about and why they don't tip, right? And again, his simple, like, what he has addressed is it basically like, when I was in the Army or the Marines or whatever, I was a troubled man, and I had a bad perspective. I'm not that man anymore. And it's like, somehow that works with their demographic. What we have to hope for is that with your moderate Democrats and your independent voters, that it doesn't work with them. And I can't imagine it will. I still want to remain that there's hope for our country and for our state here. And so I'm going to hope and believe that especially with the campaign that I think Collins is going to run, that she should prevail here. But we're going to need to work hard. That's what I think here in Maine.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you've seen the influx of money as well. Obviously, Graham Platner is breaking in a ton of money, but you're seeing Susan Collins bring in a bunch of money as well. She actually has more cash on hand than the Democrats. So obviously, when you look at this race, you look at who's getting the most attention. The Democrats they're making a splash right now, and the media is talking all about them. Everyone's a little frenzied about this situation, but I do think if you take a step back and you look at this race, we know it's going to be a tough race. We know, like you're saying, there is some oppo out there on Platner. It's just a matter of what is actually going to be the thing, the tipping point for voters. But there's so much to choose from. Like you said, he's made racist comments. He's disparaged white rural Americans, which is most of the country and most of Maine. So that is just crazy. He's also made jokes about Jesus and Virgin Mary. And this guy, like, the track record genuinely goes on. And he has said so many things that I would feel uncomfortable even repeating that he has said. So this guy the track record is insane. And I think that Susan Collins has the resources. She has the support. It's just a matter of reminding people who Graham Platner is and reminding them what Susan Collins has done for them in the Senate, right? She's the adult in the room. Her position on the Appropriations Committee has brought so much money and community funding back to the state. So it's just a matter of reminding people that. I think the Democrats have been in the spotlight a lot the past few months because of this primary, but now we're in that season of contrasting Platner with Susan Collins. And I think that will remind people why they like Susan Collins and why, they don't want a Nazi and a sexist and a racist man representing them in DC.
Yeah, that's the hope. I think one of the other things that I've been thinking a lot about since Janet Mills dropped out, because a lot of people were concerned, again, going back to Mamdani, is this like Maine's Mamdani moment? And one of the big differences is Susan Collins, right? There was no Susan Collins in that race. There was no longtime statesperson. You had a disgraced former governor who resigned because of sexual allegations, and then you had a very unknown Republican candidate who, from the start, most people knew didn't have a chance. This is a different story. This is Maine number 1, and this is Susan Collins number 2. And I think that that there is definitely hope, and I think we will prevail here. As far as midterms and stuff going on here in the state of Maine, what else are you guys focused on? Because I feel like there might be another race that you guys are interested in up here.
Absolutely. Maine's 2nd congressional district. All eyes are going to be on that one, especially with Jared Golden retiring. It's no surprise that Republicans have tried to flip the seat red. This is a Trump won seat. Voters like Republicans in this seat, but Jared Golden had a solid record to run on. And for years, Republicans really struggled to figure out the footing, figure out how to flip this seat. But now he's resigning with, no name ID, someone like Jared Golden in the way. We feel very confident in this seat. We feel very confident in the people running. So we are very excited about this seat. I think it's an exciting moment to be able to bring a Trump won district home on the House scoreboard as well. +1 for Republicans in the House is always a good thing. So we're really excited about that. It will still be a tough race. It's not a walk in the park by any means, just like the Senate race. There is a moment of convincing people and educating people on who is running, who are these people. There's no known entity in the same way that it was before. So we're excited about this race. We feel really good about it. And it's definitely one to watch as we get closer to November.
Well, what's fortunate about it is you mentioned that Trump won it. He always wins it, but he won by 10 points, I think, in the most recent election. And I think it's safe to say that there is no person in the state of Maine that is more similar to Trump than Paul LePage. Paul LePage was quoted as being Trump before Trump. He might have made that comment, in the sense that he says things that the media doesn't like and gravitates towards, and so he had some fun interviews that made their way to the media or voicemails that he left. But he's the most Trump-like candidate that I think we could have, and so I think that bodes really well. I mean, he's our former governor, and so he's well known amongst Republicans, and so I do think that should should be, again, we got to work hard. We can't take anything for granted, but I think that we should have that one as well. And it would be great. I know that there's a lot of concern about whether or not the Republicans are going to maintain control of the House nationally, and I hope we do. Odds makers don't think very highly of that, but I think that there's still a chance that we do that. And I think picking up this seat will really help. And I think the people of Maine will be really appreciative because, like, outside of Susan Collins, there's nobody in Congress that is a Republican in the Northeast.
Yeah, isn't that wild? And this is a Trump won district. People like what Republicans are doing. And like you said, former Governor LePage, he's a great candidate. Also, he has a track record to run on, right? That's something we haven't seen a ton of on the Republican side in recent cycles. You know, having a Republican who can say, this is what I've done, and point back to things that people liked and be able to say, now I want to take this to DC. That's a new approach. And I think it's a refreshing approach as well. So we're really excited about this seat. And, you know, naysayers, they're going to say whatever they want. The haters going to hate on the House odds. We feel really confident. And I think this is a good district for us to be, you know, putting resources into hyping up our Republicans and also pointing out, you know, the Democrats who are running, they have baggage as well. It's just a matter of getting the message out there. The Senate race has been taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room, but this is a race you'll see a lot of focus on as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned, the Democrats candidates, having issues outside of Graham Platner that people are going to be able to bring up. And one of the other topics that I think we wanted to discuss was dangerous Democrat rhetoric, and I feel like that's a good transition into that because obviously, what happened this last week is once again, a result of the continuous onslaught of dangerous Democrat rhetoric.
It's unbelievable to me how much news has happened in the past week between the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Janet Mills dropping out. It's been a wild week for news. But what happened on Saturday, just over a week ago, or just almost a week ago, is quite frankly so heartbreaking that it is so hard for Democrats to condemn what happened. And I think that's been a massive takeaway for a lot of people. This is an attempted assassination on the president. It should be easy for every person to condemn. There should be no one who is celebrating this, no one who has trouble condoning political violence. This is a no-brainer that we don't want this. Something has gone too far. The rhetoric has gone too far. And you see a lot of Republicans coming out and saying, thank you, law enforcement. Thank you, Secret Service, for protecting the president and the other administration officials who were in the room, and the journalists as well, keeping everyone safe. Thank you, to the people who were running the event. And then also condemning political violence, saying we don't want this. It's that very obvious message of backing the blue and condoning political violence. That seems like a no-brainer to me. I would guess you and most Americans. What is so crazy to me is you don't see Democrats easily coming out and condemning this. I mean, you've seen some very crazy responses from some people celebrating it, saying like that he was almost killed and celebrating that, like just very gross stuff. But at the same time, you've seen some people not say anything. And I think, quite frankly, that is worse. To not be able to bring yourself to condemn political violence is showing that Democrats are going in the wrong direction. They can't even say this was wrong. We don't want this. That to me gives me a very uneasy feeling. And I think it gives most Americans an uneasy feeling as well, that they're okay with political violence. A lot of the violence, in fact, most of the violence you've seen the past couple of years has been from the left. This is a third assassination attempt on the president in 3 years. There's clearly a theme happening on the left of Democrats, number one, not being able to condemn political violence, but number two, the violence coming from their side. And it is quite harrowing to me that they are not able to stand up and say something needs to change. It seems like they're okay with the direction that things are going. And I don't think that most Americans agree with that.
Yeah, it's really surprising. Most people, I think, don't even believe it yet because the mainstream media has too much of a hold on people's thinking. I've talked to some people that are not necessarily on the left, but they're kind of more centrist or even slightly maybe to the left. And they think that it's mostly still coming from the right because of January 6th. It's this nonsense. But in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, J.D. Vance shared that statistic. I can't remember what the exact numbers, but we're looking at like more than 25% of Democrats are okay with political violence, where you have a small percentage, less than 5% of Republicans. Anything is too bad. Like he said, we've got some work we've got to do on our side, but the fact that so many on their side are okay with it should tell you everything you need to know about today's Democrat Party.
I completely agree. And you're seeing a lot of younger Democrats be even more okay with it. Obviously, like you're saying, there's statistics out there that show a massive amount of Democrats are fine with political violence. But what is so shocking to me is that younger Democrats are even more okay with it on average. And I think that shows the world that these young Democrats have been brought up in. Is they're being told that it's okay to seek violence on people that you disagree with. It's okay to hate people that you disagree with. And that rhetoric, that tone needs to be dialed way back. That needs to be turned way down. And you're seeing Republicans call for that. Like you were saying, after Charlie Kirk's assassination, you saw J.D. Vance calling on Republicans to do the work on our side, but also across the country, people to tone down the rhetoric. And you're not seeing that from Democrats. In fact, on, I believe it was Wednesday of this week, the Hakeem Jeffries, who's the House Democrat leader, he said that he doesn't apologize for what he's been saying. In fact, reporters can criticize him for it, but he's not going to step back. And so if there's any question of if Democrats are, going to dial back their inflamed rhetoric, I think that goes to show you right there that their leader in the House is saying, I don't apologize. I'm fine with it. And he's setting the example, he's setting the tone, and you're seeing people follow that.
Yeah, that's extremely unfortunate. Well, I know you got to get going, so I just thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Is there anything else you want to share before we let you go?
No, thank you so much for having me on. Would love to do it again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Delanie. And everybody else, we'll see you back here next Tuesday. Thanks.